Alright, welcome to episode 4, the tail assembly. So right here we have the horizontal stabilizer with the elevators, and first we're going to look at the horns. Now we're going to need 3 horns, 2 for the elevators and 1 for the rudder, and just to kind of make sure that there's not any special sizes, these last 3 remaining ones are the same exact size, and that's kind of what I'm showing there. I think it's funny that they went through the trouble of painting them, but left the elevators gray and not green, but that's neither here nor there. So just showing the stab and the elevators. Here is the rudder with the slot for the rudder control horn. So here we go with my perma-grit tool. Really love this for sanding because you can rub your finger along the aluminum and get a nice scrape here, and this is what I'm doing here. Just be really careful. It's easy to kind of lose track and to go off, to lose your straight line, I guess you can say. And if you look really closely, one of these, I go a little bit, I lose my angle a little bit. We'll speed up the rest of this sanding, but again, as in the ailerons, if the horns are painted, you really need to scuff them up, and especially you need to scuff them up anyway to create a rough surface for the glue or epoxy to stick to. So we're going to scrape off all the paint, and don't forget to do the front and the back, and that's what I'm doing right there. Not just the sides, but the front and back as well. I'll put a link to the perma-grit sanders in the description below. They're really, really cool. I saw some other build videos use these tools and had to go out and buy one, and I'm glad I did. All right, so we'll clean up and we'll get out the wax paper and start mixing the scotch-weld to prepare to glue in the horns. Now I went through this with the ailerons, but in case you didn't see that video, we'll show this process and how I mix it and use the toothpick method to get epoxy down into the horn slots. So I take one of my mixing sticks and really mix this glue together to get a nice consistency of both pieces of the glue, both ingredients, I guess you would say. So the one thing you might want to check is the pre-fitting all the horns into the slots. I found that I needed to trim some excess balsa in these slots just to make things fit well. And I believe on the rudder I had to, the hole was there, but the hole in the covering wasn't there. So just go with a X-Acto knife and get those in there. You see anything funny with this picture? I'm doing this live, and what you just saw me was realize that I had pre-fit that horn in there backwards. So that was just kind of funny. I noticed that after I'd started the camera going. So the glue process here is 2 kind of small steps. We're going to put glue on the bottom part of the horn, or you can go over the whole tab. I concentrate on the bottom half, but we'll go ahead and insert the horn into the slot and get it all the way down exactly the way you want it. And then we're going to pull it out because we've this is step 1, getting that first coat of glue into the slot. And now we're going to take a toothpick and roll it around and get a nice dollop on there and manually work the glue into the slot, and to the best of your ability, coat the sides, the front and the back of that slot to get the glue in there. So after we get this in, 1 or 2 dollops, make sure get as much glue as you can in there, what feels good to you. make sure you can coat the walls in the front and the back, and then we'll finally enter the horn for the final time. And there you go, there's one elevator. And we'll speed up the next elevator, and the rudder is pretty much the same way. And because I had accidentally put that horn in the wrong way, I'm being very careful now because it's going to be really hard to get these out after this scotch-weld dries. So you can see I'm taking a few extra precautions to double checking that the horns are on the right way. I was kind of second guessing myself. I'm just trying to show you that that hole on the horn is to be right over the hinge point. And as I'm fiddling around, I'm kind of thinking and double checking, knowing that the camera's running. So you're seeing me do this live, even though it's sped up. And finally, we'll take care of gluing in the horn for the rudder. Same process. Coat the tab, insert it, make sure it fits. And then we'll pull it out, use a toothpick, and coat the inside of that slot with some scotch-weld. All right, so we're done. We're going to set these down, and I always like to let scotch-weld dry a full 24 hours. I know it sets up way before then, but I usually kind of plan my build, and I did that one night, and I said, okay, let's go ahead and wait another 24 hours to go to the next step. So here we're going to mount the horizontal stab to the rear of the fuselage. In the instructions, it talks about finding the middle and drawing a line down the stab. I went ahead and just measured both sides to make sure it was even and it was centered. Because you'll notice when you fit this in there, it fits in there nice and snug. And a lot of times when you mount stabs, you can mount it left and right and find the center, but then you can tilt it, you can tilt the angle, and so that's like another piece. But the way this fits in there, there's really you can't tilt it, rotate it, I guess you would say, if you're looking down like this. So I just measured on both sides and fit it in there, and we're good. So also in the instruction booklet, I'm running a little bit behind of the video, but in the instruction booklet it says test fit the vertical stab and then draw lines on the horizontal stab so you can then cut some of the covering away. So my little trick is to use Post-it notes because they're very low tack. You can pull them off and put them back on. So I just use really small Post-it notes to establish those lines, and I just cut to, I showed you me doing the first three, and then I just cut to showing it done on the top and bottom on both sides. And so now I have a pretty good indication of where that vertical stab sits and where the bottom of the fuse sits on the bottom of the horizontal stab. And here we're just showing, this is where you can see what glue is exposed, and where you can kind of plan ahead and know where you're going to be putting your scotch weld or epoxy or whatnot, and doing just another quick test fitting there. The instruction booklet says to trim the excess covering that goes around the corners. I chose not to do that because I was going to get some scotch weld on both the balsa and the covering to kind of seal it in there, and I was going to kind of keep my epoxy towards the inside because I didn't want to have a mess. I didn't want to have anything gooping out, and you'll see that turned out pretty well. So based on looking at where the exposed balsa is, I figured I took my lines with my Post-it notes and I just measured 5 millimeters or half a centimeter from inside from the Post-it notes, and I'm going to draw lines here, and that's what I'm going to use as my gauge to remove the covering. Again, this doesn't have to be exact because you're giving yourself that 5 millimeters of overlap. So if you stay within these lines, you will make sure that you will expose wood for the epoxy to adhere to, and you will have a nice seam of covering inside, underneath the vertical stab and above the rear of the fuselage, so it will look really nice. So I made some lines, made some dots, connected them with a line, and realizing here that the fine point of my Sharpie doesn't really perform very well on this, so on the other side I will use the big felt tip, and you can see it goes a lot easier. If you noticed earlier on, I had a post-it note that said top because I wanted to keep track of which was the top and which was the bottom, and I took that one off and actually wrote a T and a B just for my own, just to make sure I kept track of which was the top and which was the bottom, because it's not very easy to tell. And in fact, I don't know if you can tell if there's nothing on there. So we'll see something that ties into that coming up here in a little bit. Probably my favorite part of this video. I'm excited to talk about it. So I've established those lines, and I have a brand new blade on my X-Acto knife, and I'm basically following my lines with just a hint of pressure. And this is a really touch moment. If you drag that down, you can feel in the X-Acto knife that it's going through the covering but not going deep at all. The goal is not to go deep into the balsa wood at all, but this worked really well with a brand new blade. And so now I'm trying to find a place in the cut where I can peel up and start removing that covering. We'll speed this up. So what you just saw me do, I will try to take some of this off, and then we'll go over to the bottom. We'll move over to the bottom of the horizontal stab after this. So take your time. You have a really sharp knife, so take your time and try not to rip outside of your cuts, but if you cut nice, you can see that just separated very nice, and the covering comes right off. So here's the cool part. Look at this. We'll zoom in. This was the top, and wow, it actually says top. And this is me like, oh my God, I'm on camera. I double checked really quick, like, was this really the top? And sure enough, it was. So it was just kind of funny. I was totally not expecting to see that label on that piece of wood. So I know we're at the top now, and we should be good. So we'll fast forward the rest, and I'll show you how I took the rest of the covering off in between my lines. Sorry, my head's in the way. This is sort of really need to see where I was cutting, so I apologize, but I can kind of feel a little bit better that I don't see a bald spot, so I feel good about that. Same thing, trying to find a little place where I can pull up. Sure enough, I get one, and my cuts are really nice because you can see as I pull away, there's that nice line that develops, and we're good to go. Now we just have to release the big pieces, cut around the front and the back, and we're good to go. Look at those nice cut lines. That looks really good. And you know, it doesn't have to be exact. We're just trying to expose some of that wood. And there you go. All right, we're getting kind of long. We're going to split this up again into two halves. The next section, we will finish gluing the stabs and then do the CA hinges, and we'll be done with assembling the tail. So thanks for coming out, and we'll see you in a few days as we finish assembling the tail of the Seagull Perestroika.